Member for Mornington.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. I rise to speak on the health safeguards for people born with variations in sex characteristics Bill 2025. I want to affirm the Liberal and National Coalition's support for the intent of this bill to protect children and individuals with intersex traits from non-consensual and potentially harmful procedures. This legislation aims to ensure that deferrable, irreversible medical interventions on infants and children born with innate variations in sex characteristics are postponed until the person can provide informed consent. Urgent interventions needed to save a life or prevent serious harm will still proceed without delay, but all other non-essential treatments would require oversight by a new independent panel. The fundamental purpose of the bill, Acting Speaker, is safeguarding vulnerable children's bodily integrity and future autonomy, and that is one that we on this side wholeheartedly endorse. Now, I want to also acknowledge the intersex community's advocacy and lived experience. In supporting these reforms, we must acknowledge the long-standing advocacy of the intersex community. This legislation is, in many ways, the culmination of years of advocacy, consultation and reflection by people born with variations in sex characteristics. Brave Australians with intersex variations have spoken out about the trauma of unnecessary medical interventions carried out without their consent. Their stories have brought us to this historic moment. Stories of surgeries resulting in infertility, loss of sensation, psychological distress, and a profound violation of autonomy. I want to pay tribute to the individuals and the advocacy groups who have shown leadership and courage. We recognise that for too long their rights were not adequately or properly protected. And this bill responds directly to their call that unnecessary medical interventions on infants and young children with variations must end. Wherever possible, decisions about a child's sex characteristics should be deferred until the child can participate and give informed consent. Because these decisions are deeply personal, lifelong, and should centre on the person most affected. In fact, this is not a new conversation. In the week that I was born, in August of 1983, my parents kept a copy of a newspaper clipping of the week of the front page to put in my baby book. And there was an article, and I managed to get my wife to find it last night amongst our treasure trove in our library. The front page carried the story of a mother with a child with variations of sex characteristics, speaking publicly about the profound complexities, uncertainties, and lifelong consequences they were confronting on behalf of their baby. In that case, doctors recommended irreversible decisions about that child's body before that child could speak, understand, or consent. Medical practitioners concluded that the child's sex characteristics did not fit neatly within existing norms, and surgical intervention was undertaken in infancy to assign a sex that was thought at the time to offer the most normal future. And I want to quote from this article. I don't want to name the people because it may be that the person who was named as a baby back nearly 43 years ago may not want their story to be brought up again, so I'll change the names. But it talks about a 15-month-old baby who I'll call Kirsty, who was officially born a male and named Tom, as I'll call them. Now, this is a situation where this 15-month-old Kirsty was born a male without a functional penis. But on the advice of doctors, this baby's mother decided on sex change surgery despite 99% male chromosomes. The mother said the decision to bring up the baby as a girl was not easy. Bringing her up as a girl gives her the chance of being able to have sex, she said. As a male, sexual experiences would have had to be homosexual. We probably realise today that that wouldn't actually have necessarily been the case, but those were the thoughts at the time. Doctors told the mother that her baby would be best brought up as a girl. And when the baby was 8 months old, the doctors recommended lifelong interventions to that baby. And that was the first stage of sex surgery, which will take place. And then there'll be another stage when the child is 8 or 10 to construct a vagina. Although that baby will never be able to have babies themselves, it was thought that that person could lead a sexual life as a female rather than as a male. And the article says that often in cases where there is ambiguous genitalia, no sex is given until the parents and doctors have an opportunity to think about it, and a considered decision is made about the sex of rearing, which is in the best interests of the child. And in this child's case, it was evident that there would be problems with the penis later on, and they had recommended a change from male across to female. Now, these decisions were not made maliciously at the time, but they were made within the limits of the medical knowledge, social attitudes, and legal frameworks of the era. But the consequences made are lifelong. This child will have grown up carrying decisions made by others about their body, identity, and future, decisions that cannot be undone. More than 4 decades on, their story reminds us of these challenges that have existed for generations, and that too often decisions were made without the voice of the person most affected. And I'll note as well that this situation reflects an historical case, and it's an example of intersex management and early sex assignment surgery, which predates many modern discussions about consent and gender identity. In the early 1980s, doctors sometimes made decisions for infants with ambiguous genitalia based on what they believed would provide the most normal life outcome, a practice that later became subject to ethical debate. Now, it underscores why this Parliament now has the responsibility today to ensure that children born with variations in sex characteristics are protected, supported, and given the time and autonomy to make informed choices about their own bodies when they are able to do so. There are, of course, some key concerns and consequences with respect to this bill, though, because with any change, you also have to consider things that might not fit in the norm into the future. One is with respect to a potentially overbroad definition of innate variations in sex characteristics. The bill defines an innate variation in sex characteristics very broadly, essentially any congenital condition involving atypical development of sex characteristics. Even common conditions could be captured. Hypospadias, for example, a condition affecting about 1 in 150 to 300 baby boys, where the urethral opening is not at the tip of the penis, appears to fall under the bill's scope. Surgical experts have pointed out that conditions like this, or other conditions like epispadias or bladder exstrophy, I'm sorry if I pronounced those incorrectly, medically need to be corrected due to potential for lower urinary tract and renal damage, and should not need approval by an oversight committee, since they do not involve any ambiguity about sex or gender identity. So by casting the net so wide, there could be unintended consequences. Another aspect is ensuring parental rights and input. Protecting children's rights does not necessarily mean excluding parents from the process. On the contrary, parents are almost always striving to do what is best for their child's health and happiness. Under the bill's current framework, once a child is deemed a protected person, incapable of informed consent, decisions about any restricted treatment will go before the oversight panel and its committees, effectively taking ultimate decision-making authority out of parents' hands. Another aspect is the composition of the independent oversight panel in clause 15. We support the concept of a restricted medical treatment oversight panel, bringing multidisciplinary scrutiny to proposed treatments, but our concern is that there is no explicit paediatric requirement, and many decisions will involve infants and children, but the bill doesn't guarantee paediatric subspecialist expertise. So our proposed fix is to amend clause 15 and or clause 19 to require paediatric subspecialty expertise on the panel. Another concern as well is the criminal offence for practitioners under clause 7, which again could have unintended consequences. So talking about these points, we have put together amendments. We support and of course support the bill, but at the same time we need to have amendments to address some of these concerns. So some of the amendments we're putting forward include 1, removing the new criminal offence under clause 7, 2, explicitly mandating paediatric medical expertise on the panel by amending clause 15 and or clause 19, 3, increasing parental involvement in the panel process by amending clause 15, and 4, conducting a statutory review after 3 years by amending clause 56. Ultimately, I reiterate that the Coalition supports the core intent of this bill, which constitutes an important step towards affirming the rights of individuals who have historically been unseen and unheard. At the same time, our duty as legislators is to ensure that a well-intentioned law works in practice, and we must be vigilant against unintended consequences. So I do urge that these amendments be supported along with the bill.